everyone. I'm your host, Heather Ashley, and welcome to another episode of Women of Her Story, a podcast dedicated to celebrating women who have made or are making their mark on our society. With me today, as always, is your favorite interior designer, Darren To Move Around Jr. What did...
Beep, beep, boop, boop, y'all. It's me.
What'd you have for lunch today, Junior?
Oh, a turkey, ham, and cheese sandwich. Kept it real simple, you know what I mean? Why change up a classic? You know what I mean? If you enjoy something and you have it, why not indulge? Please. What did you have for lunch?
I had some lunch meat.
Great.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the episode, we have the tiniest bit of business to take care of. We have some really, really cool things in the works for you guys that we think you're gonna love.
Hopefully.
One thing we want to talk about real quick is our merchandise. So for the month of September, when are we? I don't know.
Who knows?
We're going to have our merch store up again on Bonfire with some new designs, including some beanies and a sweatshirt for the fall.
So go grab that Her Story merch swag and support Her Story and women.
And once again, 20% of the profits will be donated to the Henry Street Settlement in New York City. It's an incredible organization. I encourage you all to look them up, even donate on your own. And then another thing, super quick, I usually talk about this at the end of the episode, but I wanted to bring it up now. If you could do us the biggest favor ever, and right after you listen to the episode, if you could subscribe, rate, and review the show, it helps us grow. I know that sounds silly, but it really, really does. It has something to do with, like, algorithms or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of maths behind it. We haven't quite worked it out, but that's why we're doing the podcast, you know?
We're figuring it out.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
But,
so, yeah, if you guys could do that, that would be the best. Now that the boring part is over, let's get into today's Her Story lesson about the first woman in America to receive a medical degree.
Woo!
Woo! Elizabeth Blackwell was born to parents Hannah Lane and Samuel Blackwell on February 3rd, 1821 in Bristol, England. She was the third of 9 children, and when I say that this family was active, I mean it. Her father, Samuel... You'll see, it's a plant. You'll get it.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
fine.
sure. I'm excited.
Her father, Samuel, was a sugar refiner, a Quaker, and an anti-slavery activist. Her brother, Henry, was an abolitionist and women's suffrage supporter, and he was actually married to women's rights activist Lucy Stone. Her sister, Emily, followed Elizabeth's footsteps into the medical field, and her sister-in-law, Antoinette Brown Blackwell, was the first ordained female minister in a mainstream Protestant denomination.
Wow, this family was really involved, to say the least.
Yeah, coming up, really progressive.
They were very busy. They were active, but helping out the outreach is, that's
See what I did?
activism.
In 1832, when Elizabeth was 11, the family moved from England to America. They settled in Cincinnati, Ohio, for not just financial reasons, but to help abolish slavery.
Nice.
Just a few years after the family arrived in Ohio, Samuel Blackwell died in 1838, leaving the large family penniless during a financial crisis.
Wow, yeah.
The Panic of 1837 was a financial crisis that touched off a major depression that lasted until the mid-1840s. Profits, prices, and wages went down, unemployment went up, and everyone was in a bad mood all the time. I feel like we know that feeling.
It's interesting. I wonder if history ever ends up repeating itself. I can't imagine those things end up happening. I don't think, those aren't in the books.
Nope. Never.
No.
Elizabeth, her mother, and her 2 older sisters worked as teachers in order to stay afloat and make ends meet. At the time, this was an expected career path for women wanting to, have a career. In her autobiography, Pioneer Work in Opening the Medical Profession to Women, she recalled that she, quote, hated everything connected with the body and could not bear the sight of a medical book. My favorite studies were history and metaphysics, and the very thought of dwelling on the physical structure of the body and its various ailments filled me with disgust.
I gotta say, I agree with her to a certain extent. I'd rather read about, like, that sort of data, like, that information, as opposed to, like, dissecting.
Looking at it.
I'm glad that I didn't have that class in high school or in any, like, movie where they were, like, dissecting animals in class.
You never did that?
No, thankfully. No. I was
We
fortunate enough
dissected
to avoid that.
cats.
Yeah, no, we didn't have that in Queens. Shouts
In,
out
like-
Queens. Thank goodness. I'm so happy for that education. Straight up.
Well, it wasn't until a conversation Elizabeth had when she was 24 with a friend who was dying of uterine cancer that her interest in the medical field was spurred. Her friend expressed that her entire ordeal would have been better if she had had a female physician.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially with something so specific as, like, uterine cancer, you
Yeah.
want a woman, you want someone who also has a
Might
uterus.
have, yeah, might relate more. Oh, that
Maybe
can be
be
any
a little
true.
more sensitive.
Yeah,
or,
1,000%. Yeah, I'd feel comfortable in that procedure. Anyway.
At the time, there were very few medical colleges, none of which accepted women. It was common practice at the time as well for male physicians to train as apprentices under experienced doctors instead of, like, going to medical school, right? But very few women were apprenticed, and then they became unlicensed physicians because they couldn't be licensed. Elizabeth asked those around her that she trusted most if they thought it was a good idea for her to become a doctor. All of which stated they believed it was a good idea, but it was simply impossible. Being the determined woman that she was, she decided that if it's a good idea, then it must be done.
Absolutely.
She would find a way to make it happen.
It was just improbable. Those people hadn't even, thought of that idea.
Yeah,
but
they're like, wow, good idea, but no one's going to teach you.
It's like, yeah. So.
Yeah. She was still teaching during this time in her life when she was shifting fields. And while teaching in South Carolina, Elizabeth boarded with a family of 2 Southern physicians who mentored her. They encouraged her to utilize their vast medical library. In 1847, Elizabeth went to Philadelphia, hoping that her Quaker friends could assist her in getting into medical school. She applied to numerous schools and was, of course, rejected from every single one of them, until she finally received an acceptance letter from the Geneva College in rural New York.
Excellent.
Here comes something to burst your bubble, though.
Oh, I was so happy. I was really writing up that.
It is rumored that her acceptance was meant to be as a practical joke.
Oh.
Yeah. They assumed she wouldn't accept her acceptance.
Oh.
Yeah. The fools, though, because she was like, she was like, I know you don't want me, and I know this was a joke, but I'm gonna come here anyway.
The joke's on you, because now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that just the worst?
She left herself all the way to the East Coast. That's what that was. They gritted their teeth, too. How stupid.
Yeah, I know.
That's the dumbest thing.
I know. While at Geneva College, she suffered prejudices from professors and students. She was forced to sit separately at lectures, I assume so she wouldn't distract the male students. Interestingly enough, it was a common occurrence for her male classmates to become studious and mature when they were around her. Shocker.
Interesting.
Yeah. She was excluded from labs. She had to persuade them to let her attend anatomy classes. They were worried that females just shouldn't be exposed to such things.
How could you even how could you even joke about her, like, like the acceptance and then limit her like this? Like, that's you got to go with the joke, that, like, 100%.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Well, here's the thing. By the end of her time there, she had not only earned their respect, but after presenting her final thesis on typhus fever, Elizabeth graduated first in her class in 1849.
Oh, face.
Dropping
face.
Bomb.
Take that,
So,
Geneva.
Isn't that incredible?
Losers.
Oh my gosh.
That's what you get. Boom.
Just crazy.
Oh.
Crazy. Elizabeth continued her training at London and Paris hospitals. While women were able to practice medicine in Europe, they were generally subjected to midwifery and nursing. So they were like, you can't be a surgeon, but like, if you want to be a midwife, like...
I mean, I want to do it
go
all.
for it, girl. Yeah. Well, at La Maternité, Elizabeth was working on the eye of a sick infant and was squirted in the eye with infected fluid and contracted purulent ophthalmia.
Oh my God.
Despite a rigorous cleansing that even included leeches, she lost vision in her eye and had to have it removed.
And we just watched this episode of House 2 with the leeches and the maggots cleaning up the dead skin cells.
So, I know.
That's so painful. That's
I know.
not painful, but like the thought process is, I'm not having a good time.
Well, unfortunately, this did crush her initial dream of becoming a surgeon. You can't be a surgeon with one eye. I mean, times might have changed now. I'm not sure if there are surgeons with one eye, but...
Maybe you get like the face mask and then...
I think it has to do with being like a depth thing.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh.
Because if you're... Yeah.
Man.
Which is so unfortunate. But nothing could stop our Elizabeth. In 1851, she returned to New York City. There were stigmas against female physicians, of course. There were few patients willing to be treated by a woman, and it was difficult, if not impossible, to be able to practice in hospitals and clinics. Everywhere she tried to work refused to allow her to practice, and would often tell her to just go open up her own clinic if she wanted to practice that badly. Well.
I mean, so that's... You're about to say that's what she did. Then.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like... Why would you even test her?
I know, ridiculous. Well, with the help of her Quaker friends, she opened up the New York Infirmary for Poor Women and Children in 1854 near Tompkins Square in southeast Manhattan.
There you go. Yeah, shouts out Manhattan. Shouts out New York City.
Well, this area was primarily populated with impoverished immigrant communities that lacked hot water and indoor plumbing. They battled outbreaks of typhoid, diphtheria, and other diseases. It was a one-room clinic that provided free healthcare to those that needed it the most. That very same year, tired of being alone, Elizabeth adopted a 7-year-old Irish girl, Kitty, from an orphanage on Randall's Island.
Aww.
I know. And after the adoption, she said, "I feel full of hope and strength for the future. Who will ever guess the restorative support which that poor little orphan had been to me?"
Wow, she's done so much.
I know. I just love her. Incredible.
She's so selfless.
Right. And she was like, instead of turning to, I don't know, unhealthy coping mechanisms, she was like, I could take on a kid.
Yeah, let me help another soul.
Let me help a little kid.
Yeah. I lost an eye. Let me help another person.
Well, remember when I mentioned that Elizabeth had a younger sister, Emily, who followed her into the medical field? Mm-hmm. Well, she ended up becoming a surgeon.
Runs in the family.
I know. And she, Elizabeth, and a third physician, Dr. Marie Sakrevska, established the New York Infirmary for Indigent Women and Children on May 12th, 1857. The dream was to have a hospital staffed entirely by females. During the Civil War, the hospital even trained nurses for the Union Hospital.
Wow.
The hospital charged $4 a week and provided free care to anyone who needed it. She established the Sanitary Visitor, in which someone would visit the poorest neighborhoods to teach families about cleanliness, fresh air, and healthy food. Elizabeth made trips back and forth to England, raising funds and working on a parallel infirmary project over there. During one of her trips to England to lecture, she became the first woman listed on the British Medical Register. I know. She's just...
Everything.
How is she doing all of this? I really don't understand.
She's so inspirational. Like,
just keeps
driven.
going and going and going. Nothing... She's not satisfied.
She's not stopped.
I'll never be
she
satisfied.
can't be stopped. There you go. Hey.
It's been a while since I referenced Hamilton.
Yeah, at least 2 episodes.
The infirmary stateside eventually became a general hospital, and the name was shortened to the New York Infirmary. They served more than 1 million men, women, and children during its first 100 years. It then eventually became what we know today as the New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital. Its hallways have murals depicting her original infirmary. There is a street corner named Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell Place, and they house her writing desk from Bristol, England. Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital says, Lower Manhattan Hospital
Hospital.
Oh, no. Okay. He says, Dr. Blackwell's legacy lives on in our hospital. Her social consciousness lives on in our commitment to women and children and the diverse and vibrant communities that we serve. And her leadership lives on in our women physician leaders making a difference here. Elizabeth helped establish the U.S. Sanitary Commission in 1861 under the auspices of President Abraham Lincoln. So think about what time period we are in right now.
Yeah.
It's so weird to think about,
Well, when you also said something about how much the hospitals charge, and I was like, $4. What?
a coffee.
I don't
Price of
even
a
know.
coffee.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like
a
with
price of
inflation...
not even, because, the Starbucks, like, the caramel
Those fancy
macchiatos that I like,
fancies.
Yeah, that's like at least
It's
$5,
like- yeah.
something in Midtown. So $4 for a hospital visit?
For a week.
I mean, of course, the times are different, like you were about
And
to say.
inflation. But still... yeah, it's very interesting.
Laughable.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. But it's funny because doing this research, I kept forgetting when this was taking place, and then when Abraham Lincoln was brought up and the Civil War,
You're like,
I
what?
was like, oh, yeah,
that's going
where
on
we
now.
are
Yeah,
right now.
the Union.
It's crazy, yeah. So the program initially started as an association to coordinate the training of nurses for the battlefield during the Civil War, and it blossomed. After meeting President Lincoln, Elizabeth penned a rather sassy letter to her daughter, Kitty. It's really funny. Okay. A tall, ungainly, loose-jointed man was standing in the middle of the room. He came forward with a pleasant smile and shook hands with us. I should not at all have recognized him from the photograph. He is much uglier than any I have seen. Then he plumped his long body down on the corner of the large table, caught up one knee, looking for all the world like a Kentucky loafer on some old tavern steps, and began to discuss some point about the war.
Yeah, I mean, you had to. I feel like Lincoln had to know he wasn't the most good-looking man. I'm sure
Oh, of course
he
they
had
do.
to have known that the pictures definitely made him look more endearing.
Yeah.
I mean, that chin strap. When I wore that, when I had that facial hair in high school, I looked like a billy goat. And it was ridiculous. Lincoln was, no, come on. Lincoln wasn't
so
winning any,
tall.
and not to say that they have to, like, be good looking,
No,
but, like,
it's just
no.
it's
He
just
wasn't.
so funny. She's like, I don't think I'd have recognized him.
If he was charming people, it's because of his hat. His speech, like, not.
I love that she met Abraham Lincoln, though.
Yeah, and she's like casually writing about it.
Yeah, she's
I
like,
like the
he's-
first, the initial details too. That's what she thinks of him. That's really, I like that.
Oh, yeah. In 1868, Elizabeth was able to open a medical college attached to the infirmary, the Women's Medical College of the New York Infirmary. It was one of the first 4-year medical colleges in the country. Many were just 2 years at the time. After 3 decades of exhibiting a reputation for rigor and excellence, it became part of what is known today as Weill Cornell medicine.
I definitely prefer my doctor is going to school for 4 years as opposed to 2.
Yeah,
That
Yeah,
makes me feel a
probably.
little more,
Yeah,
confident in their skill.
definitely.
Not to say, that like the 2 years might not be enough, but 4 years is definitely better.
4 years is good. And the
Sure.
school actually agreed to take in all of the existing students at the time.
Oh, excellent.
Well, especially considering they were a lot of women.
Yeah.
They're like, well, you guys are doing good work. We'll take you on
Might as
too.
well, yeah.
With this, she was able to rally support in Britain for the acceptance of women in medicine. A year after opening the school, she placed her sister, Dr. Emily Blackwell, in charge, and she returned to London. After her arrival back in England, Elizabeth set up her own practice in 1870. She campaigned with others for the admission of women to be able to receive medical degrees, and it took some time, but legislation was finally passed in 1876. Now, in 1871, she founded the National Health Society. The society was aimed at educating people about the benefits of hygiene and healthy lifestyles. She was known to say that male doctors were starting epidemics by not washing their hands between patient visits.
Ew.
Yeah, super gross.
You went to school for 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. Damn it. Well, you should learn that before school, men.
The society's motto was, prevention is better than a cure.
Shoot.
Wash your hands, wear a mask.
Shoot. If that's not the realest thing you'll hear today.
Right? One of the students at the Women's Medical College was talented physician Sophia Jex Blake, and in 1874, she, Elizabeth Blackwell, and Elizabeth Garrett Anderson established the London School of Medicine for Women. The primary focus of this particular school was to prepare women for the licensing exam of Apothecaries Hall. A year later, Elizabeth became the professor of gynecology. Because, why not add more stuff to her resume?
She's like,
What's
I haven't
going
done
on?
enough. There are all these occupations, and I'm going to do them all. Good for her, though.
I know.
I'd trust that, someone like her in those positions.
Mm-hmm. She published numerous books and pamphlets about health and medicine, and was also involved in many reform movements. To name a few, moral reform, hygiene, medical education, preventative medicine, sanitation, family planning, women's suffrage, and the abolition of prostitution and white slavery. Now, I know what you're thinking, and white slavery actually has nothing to do with race. I ended up in a bit of a research rabbit hole on this one, so I will just give the bullet points.
I'm glad. Thank you very much.
White slavery refers to the organized coercion of unwilling persons into prostitution. So it's human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in case you haven't noticed, white is associated with purity, at least in the Western world. Wedding dresses, for instance, they are supposed to be white to signify the bride's purity before the marriage. If you are not pure, you are not supposed to wear white during that ceremony.
I'm just going to say it because you've said it a bunch of times. Pure now seems like such a dirty word.
I know, it's very
pure,
odd.
Might as well, you might as well just bleep that out. That's gross.
And as in a lot of ceremonies, white is used in a lot of ceremonies, particularly religious ones. Interestingly, though, it seems like the term was relatively flexible, and it included not just coerced prostitution, but prostitution by choice and any female sexual behavior deemed immoral. In a paper written by Alex Smolak, she said, quote, "When sex work is contextualized as white slavery, the saving women approach can seem justified since their participation was perceived as being actively forced rather than indirectly forced by various contextual factors, political, economical, and gender norms. More specifically, a woman who was kidnapped, beaten, and imprisoned by a white slavery ring was in a different position than an immigrant woman who was recruited for work in a brothel and who had limited language skills and little education and who needed to support dependents." Now, I may be overstepping here, but based on my research of Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, it is my belief that her interest in this particular movement is that of a hygienic and lifestyle nature, because I believe she was responsible for treating these women, and I think that she wanted to do everything she could to make their lives better and not ridden with disease, and so she wanted to be part of this movement to provide preventative measures, and not necessarily that she was wanting to, that she thought these women were bad.
No, it was separate of whatever they were doing. It was that she wanted to make sure that whatever they were doing, she was safe doing it. Mm-hmm. It's like she didn't care what their occupation was. She knew what it was because she was treating these women, multiple women.
Exactly.
She just needed to make sure that they didn't end up getting to her.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
being
And
healthier,
I think that her stance in
pro.
abolishing these two, in abolishing white slavery,
Yeah.
wasn't that she thought they were bad people. I think it's that she wanted to give them what she could.
Yeah.
I ended up in a big research hole.
No, that's good though.
Oh, wow. I didn't segue well. That's fine. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell died in her home on May 31st, 1910, at the age of 89.
Wow.
In the last 2 decades of her life, she didn't practice medicine, but she was relentlessly dedicated to the causes I mentioned before. The impact that Elizabeth had on the medical world is still echoing today. In 1881, there were 25 female doctors registered in England and Wales. By 1911, 495 were registered.
Wow.
You know, I think she's someone who she was like, come on, I've got the door open. Come on, I know you want to do this.
Yeah, she really held the door open for a lot of women.
Really did.
It's it's amazing that she had the foresight to do as much as she did in order to set people up on the right path in the future. You know, It's great.
I'll leave you with this quote. If society will not admit of women's free development, then society must be remodeled.
Mic drop.
Mic drop.
I don't understand if like what people don't get about that, because she said that so long ago, and like we're still it's like the same song and dance, and you know it's
110 years since she died.
If you don't bother educating yourself and learning about the history of like, you know, not just her past, but like the the past of other countries and why things affect people a certain way, then you are making yourself way more ignorant. You're
just losing
purposely.
out. Yeah.
You know, you're not choosing to be a part of this planet that we all exist on, and you're I don't know. Go to Mars.
It's like I was saying earlier. I had seen a statistic that was like women make up over 50% of the population, yet they're only like, I think it's like 0.3 or maybe 3% of recorded history, like of recorded and celebrated history. So
yeah,
like,
I mean, it's definitely not enough. Whenever I look for my morning morsel on Twitter, sometimes I have to do birthdays instead of actual, you know, historical events that women had took
because
part
they just weren't recorded.
Yeah, there's so many websites that record make note of all the men and the historical events that they've taken part in. But like women get sports events, some movies, birthdays. I know women get the luxury of being born, so then we get to do morning morsels about them. But like when it comes to historical information, I promise you, there's so much more information out there about men than women. It almost makes me think like women didn't do anything in time. That's what the internet looks like.
That's what the patriarch wants.
It's like
yeah. Yeah, well, I was about to say closing thoughts, Junior, but
that was it. That was the tangent. Interior designer signing off. Thank you very much for having me. I'm gonna go eat second lunch right now.
Thank you guys all so much for listening again this week. Come back this Friday for an interview with director, producer, and creator of the Drama Desk nominated Food of Love, Victoria Ray Sook.
Boo, boo, boo. That's going to be a good one.
She's awesome. You know, in this interview, she talks about who she thinks is responsible for her creative outlook, kazoos, and having confidence in what you're putting out there.
I think people need to talk more about kazoos in 2020. That's probably why everything's happening. So, hashtag kazoo.
Hashtag bring kazoos.
Hashtag bring kazoos. We're bringing kazoos back.
Yeah.
Hashtag kazoo life. Hashtag banjo and kazooie.
Oh my God. I said it before and I'll say it again. Subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on the social medias for extra daily inspiration. Twitter.
At the Her Story Pod.
Instagram.
At Women of Her Story Podcast.
Visit our website at
ofherstory.com.
or send us an email to
womenofherstorypodcast@gmail.com.
And until Friday, be safe, stay healthy, and show the world what you're made of.
Wear a mask. This is a New York Glitch production. You are the worst.